You had a tweet that says Team USA is an indictment of the Lakers. That's an interesting take. Can you get into that?
Yeah. So, for instance, if you had two top 10 players who played at a top 10 level for, what do we have, 5 years of AD and 6 of LeBron at this point.
Wow,
so
that much.
we have one Anthony Davis injury in the 2021 playoffs, which you kind of have to write off, right? Like that was an injury. 2022, both LeBron and AD were a little banged up by the end of the year, but I think they both could have played if the team was better. But as you start to look at it, it's difficult to be as mediocre as they've been with the types of top end talent that they have. This extends further. This isn't like you've got Luka and Steph, where two top 10 players, but the two of them don't have the physical gifts to kind of help you in all these other areas of the game. Like LeBron and AD are still, in terms of a duo, probably the most physically imposing duo in the league in terms of what they can do in a playoff series on the defensive glass, on the defensive end in general, in terms of just winning in rock fights and that kind of stuff. Like they are, you could not craft a better duo in terms of like a foundation to build easy roles for people around. Like you're creating easy, achievable roles. That's how they won in 2020. Like all these guys, Danny Green has his flaws. Like that's a guy, I mean, you remember him with the Spurs. Anytime you put the ball on the floor, it was an adventure with Danny Green, right? Like Alex Caruso has his offensive limitations. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a guy that doesn't put the ball on the floor a ton. But like they just kind of fell into these really small, easy roles next to LeBron and AD, and they won. And they didn't just win, they won in dominating fashion. I was talking about this the other day. Before the shutdown, they were at a 64-win pace. That's the same as the Celtics this year. Like they won their playoff games on average by 12 points per 100 possessions. The Celtics won by 15. Like this is a dominant team that we were talking about. But there's been a mismanagement of resources ever since that point, and specifically an underappreciation for the role players, which is what we talked about a lot. And I understand that there's complications on the back end. Like LeBron pushed for Russell Westbrook. Absolutely he did. He's wanted a playmaker ever since he was 2018 in Cleveland, right? Like we know that LeBron likes to play with a heavy ball handler, but it was undisputed around the league that was a bad idea. I didn't talk to anybody who was like, oh, this is Russell Westbrook thing for the Lakers. This could really work. It was like, everyone was like, oh no, are they really going to do this? You know, like they sent out, I'll just be straight up. Kuzma and KCP are both better basketball players than Russ at this phase in his career, because he's reached a point where his athleticism has fallen off to a certain extent, and the bad outweighs the good. And so you sent out a first-round draft pick and 2 quality starting caliber two-way players for Russell Westbrook, and that immediately tanked him. And then you look at letting Alex Caruso go when really it was all about money. They could have retained him, and the gap between what Chicago offered him and what the Lakers offered him was small enough that they should have been able to bridge that gap. The prioritization of Taylor Horton-Tucker, little things like this summer, they don't have any open roster spots because they offered a bunch of player options to guys like Christian Wood and to Cam Reddish, going back to letting Brook Lopez go for absolutely nothing. I can go on and on. I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but there have been dozens of unconscionable basketball decisions. And when you actually start to dig into it, it's like everywhere you hear, it's like, oh, Kurt Rambis is actually like one of Jeannie Buss's biggest basketball advisors. Like that's a little weird. Like there's not exactly like a basketball grinder in the front office, like a guy that's like, who's like the basketball Nostradamus in that front office, the way that like Jerry West was for the Clippers? Like who's the guy that like has this proven track record of basketball decisions? You've got Joey and Jesse, the kids that have been doing an amazing job with the scouting department, but that's like a rare bright spot in that front office. They're notoriously insular. They're notoriously like they kind of like do favors for friends and family. It's just when you really look at it, it's difficult to be as bad as they've been with those two at the helm. And when you look at all the mistakes they've made, it just kind of feels like a wasted opportunity. And I mean, you don't have to look any further than just how successful LeBron was at every other stop in his career.
Yeah, it's been put on LeBron, the getting of Russell Westbrook, but there are a lot of rumors about how Pelinka really wanted that. And not only did he really want it, he liked that LeBron owned the decision. So if it doesn't work out, it falls on to James. And Pelinka is an agent, and I think agents can be good at talent acquisition and keeping superstars happy, and that is the primary focus. That is what they're optimized to do. But that doesn't mean that they're optimized to do everything else that you're talking about, which is finding pieces that fit and scouting and valuing what guys who aren't stars do for your team. So that seems to be part of it, in addition to the other thing you mentioned, which is just too many cooks in the kitchen, and it doesn't seem like they're the greatest of chefs. That's the other thing that seems to be happening. I agree with you. I think that starting point, those two guys and how complementary they are, they should have gotten more out of this era, but unfortunately the operation seems well suited to get those guys and not necessarily well suited to do anything else with them.
Would you agree that it is the general manager's responsibility? Like, I keep thinking, like, I'm not a general manager, obviously, but if I was general manager of the Lakers, I would have legitimately put my foot down. I would have gone to Jeannie Buss and I would have been like, this is a bad idea. We should not do this. Yeah. And I would be like, and if they forced it through, I would have made sure there was a report out the next day that like I wasn't necessarily on board with this. Like it was so obviously a bad idea in the moment. And again, I agree. LeBron pushed for it, but to me, the ultimate decision-making responsibility falls with leadership. And if they allowed that to take place, they are culpable, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, your name is on it when you're general manager, and there are different views as to what your responsibilities are. I remember the late agent Dan Fagan would get frustrated because general managers would tell him that they couldn't do this or that because of their owner. And excuse my language, YouTube, but Dan Fagan would say, they're always saying, my fucking owner, my fucking owner. That's your job. Your job is to convince your owner on doing the right thing. And that is one way to view it, that it almost doesn't even matter what your constraints are. It's ultimately your job as general manager, and it will fall on you if you can't get it done. And that's just that.